Two pub landlords allegedly saw three victims of one of the country's most notorious gangland murders, with a mystery fourth man on the night they were killed, but neither of them were interviewed by police. A team of former detectives independently reviewing the case have claimed. One of the licensees, who ran the former Fortune of War in Basildon, now believed to be dead, even claimed to have seen Pat 8, Tony Tucker and Craig Robb with another man an hour after the prosecution said they were shot dead in a Range Rover in Workhouse Lane, Rettendon near Basildon on the 6th of December 1995. Essex police did not interview the witness or investigate the sighting further despite its potential significance, according to the former Met Police murder detectives who have chosen to independently review the infamous Essex boys' murders of Tate 37, Tucker 38 and Rolfe 26. Anton Johnson, 80, is a second former pub landlord of the former Orset Cock, who also claims to have seen the three leaving his pub with another man on the same evening. But although a police action log dated December the 15th, 1995 suggests they tried to speak to him, he told Essex News investigators they never did. The three were found shot dead in a Range Rover found parked at a farm track in Rettendon, Essex on the morning of December the 7th, 1995. The grisly murders spawned a series of feature films and were linked to the death of ecstasy victim Leah Betts, as the murdered men were involved in the supply of the drugs that killed her. 3 years later, Michael Steele and Jack Worms are convicted of the murders on the evidence of Supergrass Darren Nichols, who claimed to be the getaway driver after his arrest after a cannabis importation in May 1996. The prosecution case was that the three were shot dead at just before 7 p.m. the night before, which tied in with Nichols' account of when he drove the killers. Worms and Steele have always protested their innocence. The former detectives who have been given access to defence case files have also used their contacts and knowledge and case papers previously uploaded to the internet. Among defence case files, they found details of the two alleged sightings of the three victims with another unidentified man, what they say are incident case room action logs from the original investigation. They claim the actions were never fully completed, with neither landlord spoken to in person. Former Met Police DCI David McKelvey said, on December the 15th, 1995, a call was received by the Rettendon Murder Squad from the licensee of the Fortune of War pub Basildon, stating at about 8 p.m. on the night of the murders, all three victims were in the pub with another male, well known to the landlord. An action was raised for a detective to make inquiries with the landlord to establish the facts, but there is no record of this ever being carried out and any statement from the landlord. This inquiry may have proved they were alive after 6:59, the time the Crown said they were murdered. The Fortune of War was demolished in 2003 and it is understood the licensee in question has died. Mr McKelvey said the same day, December the 15th, a separate action was raised for the same detective to visit Mr Johnson, the landlord of the former The Orset Cock public house in Thurrock, to carry out inquiries into whether the three victims had been in the pub the same evening. A separate police action log said, make inquiries re the victims in the Orset Cock on Wednesday evening. The licensee saw the victims and a fourth man leaving the pub after meeting there. The licensee saw the victims and a fourth man leaving the pub after meeting there. The log was updated to say the detective visited and spoke to the bar staff and Mrs Johnson, who said they had not seen the victims there on that night, but that Mr Johnson was not there, adding Mr Johnson would phone if he had any further information. Mr McKelvey added, there were no records of any further attempt to speak to him or any statement from Mr Johnson to show this important line of inquiry, when coupled with the Fortune of War sighting, was explored. Essex News and Investigations contacted Mr Johnson, who is now involved in the butcher's trade and is currently in Australia, and asked him about the sighting. He said at the time the pub he ran was a den of iniquity that was frequented by local gangsters and heavies, including the late Billy Blundell, and was under constant police surveillance to see who frequented it. He insisted seeing Tucker, Tate and Rolfe in his pub with another man on the night they were murdered, but said Essex police had never spoken to him about the sighting. Mr Johnson also said he'd never contacted the force to say they were in his pub that day, so was unsure why the police were aware about his sighting to create the action log in question. He said, to be quite truthful, the boys were in there and another guy did come in, and the week prior they'd been in there and had a set to with someone in the pub. I went out for dinner and I saw them leave, and this was getting dark, and the other guy came in and they all went off, and that was it. It was all over. From my point of view, they'd definitely left by 6 p.m. Mr. Johnson said he had no idea who the fourth man he said they were with was. He said, "No, I can't say I did. When they came in the first time, because the last time the week before, they'd had a ruck in there. They came up and apologised when they came in on that evening. They said, 'We're not here to cause any trouble, we're only here to have a drink, and we're leaving,' and he sat us inside the door. He said he was familiar with the three and knew them to speak to." Mr. Johnson said, "I went out for dinner, which had to be there for about 8 or 7 o'clock. They left. I couldn't go and get changed because I was still in the pub until I knew they were gone because of the trouble they'd caused. But they'd gone before I went out. I left at 7, but they left probably an hour earlier than that. They came in, and subsequently that was it. There were some other people in the pub who also knew them. Everybody was a little bit nervy of them because they'd lost the plot really. By that time, they were hitting and clumping everybody. They came in, and although there was staff in the bar, I wouldn't leave the bar whilst they were there because of the last time they'd been in. They weren't the sort of people you'd mess about with, you know. They came up and apologised, and apparently the guy or whatever they took him out the week before, whoever he was, they weren't very tasteful. Mr. Johnson said he'd never called the police to report the sighting. The officers had never approached him about it. He said, "I've never spoken to the police about anything. Not once did they come to me. They didn't even contact me. Nobody ever came near me." He said his wife had not spoken to the police either, but the force action log said the pub had been visited by a detective on December the 15th, 1995, and spoken to her and other bar staff, who had all said they'd not seen the three on that day. Mr. Johnson added, "My wife's here now, and she definitely didn't know. I mean, I would have thought that if they'd come and seen her, they would have obviously come back and seen me. They definitely didn't come and talk to me." Mr. Johnson said his pub was notorious for local faces and heavies. He said, "Unfortunately, my pub was a den of inequity. All the heavy boys went in there. I mean, my place, everybody used it. But as I say, the police used to have a van across the other side with a hole in the side that was recording everybody that came in and out of the place. But strangely enough, they never came in and never even mentioned it. They never came and spoke to me. The police in the bar, I mean, it was a bit like a cowboy western. Everybody goes a bit quiet and shuffles to the end of the bar out of the way." According to phone logs in the case, Pat Tate was making a call from his landline at about 6 p.m. when Mr. Johnson says he believes the four left the Orset Cock. However, he also said it was getting dark as the four left the pub. According to records, sunset in Essex on December the 5th, 1995 would have been just before 4 p.m. Mr. Johnson says the three were also wearing black trench coaches when he saw them. He said, "Yeah, they had black trench coaches on. They came in two, then one, and then the last one came in. The last came in and called them out, and they all went out." When the bodies were found, none of the three were wearing trench coaches. One had a black jacket with 2 white stripes down the arms, while the 2 others had black plain jackets on. A video was recently released, with Mr. Johnson being recorded as saying the 3 inside the pub were wearing black Cromberries, and that he saw the black Range Rover outside. The Range Rover in question was dark blue. However, Mr. McKelvey said that Mr. Johnson's new claims were critical to the case. Williams was released from prison last May and still remains a Category A prisoner, with a new parole hearing expected soon. The CCRC Criminal Case Review Commission has been investigating Williams and Steele's application for a review of their convictions for 4 years with no outcome. An Essex police spokesman would not answer specific questions about the sightings or alleged lack of investigation. She said, "There was an exhaustive police investigation, and following the trials and convictions, the evidence has been further examined by the CCRC and the Court of Appeal. This case is currently under review with the CCRC. It would be inappropriate to comment further whilst the review is ongoing. We, of course, always fully cooperate with the CCRC, would take direction from them about any investigation action required. Any new evidence identified should be routed through the CCRC for their consideration."